So today I'm going to talk about what is knowledge management, why are alumni really a key to that, and I'm going to make that case. And then I'm going to hopefully have some discussions, but also give you some tools. That's usually what my focus is in the Alumni ACES pieces as well, is like, what can you do tomorrow? What kind of plan can you put in place? And so I'm going to give some tools there. Then I want to talk about innovation, where it comes from and why alumni can be a really important catalyst for that. And then same kind of formula we'll discuss and hopefully have some tools for you to walk away with. So first, this is the case. The reality is right now, supposedly there are around 10,000 a day retiring. And this kind of baby boomer exodus, they call it like the silver tsunami, out of the workplace is not going to end until around 2030. So people are retiring. And with that, there is a giant wave of intellectual property and ideas and knowledge that is also being drained from the workforce as we speak. And 84% of employees say it's significant loss when experienced workers retire without knowledge transfer. I don't know what the 16% are saying it's not, right? I mean, this is a hard thing. This is a tough thing to deal with. And of course, as has been said the last day, job hopping is the new norm. Workers often have to self-train. Again, I don't know what the 53% are doing. Every organization I'm joined has a bunch of self-training going on, right? And learning. And after you get there a year, you tell the new person, like, oh, by the way, these are the 10 things I had to figure out on my own, right? And so this idea of knowledge not really being, most organizations not really being great at capturing knowledge. Right? We can think of knowledge at the firm level as kind of like the brain of the firm, right? Or the brain of the organization. I think if we don't take it seriously, it's going to be, there's often problems. So I want to kind of just, a knowledge management 101, I want to kind of just distill what types of knowledge there are. So there's explicit knowledge, which is, those are your SOPs, those are your things that are written down. Right, which are really not super helpful, right? Very easy to capture. Implicit knowledge are things that you perhaps could learn in a classroom, but it's a little bit tougher to learn. These are things that are harder to capture. You have to really get qualitatively into the process and the people to understand implicit. Tacit knowledge, this by definition, you cannot learn in a classroom. It's something you have to learn by doing. And it's on a continuum as well, right? This idea of explicit all the way to tacit. And so researchers research all this stuff, and what they found is that tacit knowledge is really the most valuable knowledge, the knowledge that leads to competitive advantage. And there was this interesting study that looked at how important tacit knowledge was, and they measured it with NBA basketball data, and they found that all else equal, when people were on the court at the same time for longer periods of time, over years even perhaps, it was a big predictor, strong predictor of team performance, because they knew where each other were going to be, right? They had this kind of shared mental model, this shared experience that you couldn't just teach somebody, right? It was something that happened over years. And why is tacit knowledge so valuable and important? One, it's rare. It's extremely hard to imitate, right? So an outside competitor can't just say, oh, this is the stuff they're doing this by, right? So this firm brain, right? This tacit knowledge becomes really important. And the other ways they've kind of described tacit knowledge, something that's tacit would be like hitting a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, right? You can't do that without just doing it over time. So anyway, I'm hoping that you can kind of get this sense of what I'm talking about with knowledge management. Now, certain firms, so here's some more examples, right? So in a banking setting, documented clients' credit requirements, approval thresholds, contract terms. Not documented often is the CFO says the CEO makes decisions, but really it's the COO that drives everything. Never propose anything in the first meeting. They need time to socialize ideas internally. And always CC the VP of corporate development. She's the real gatekeeper, even though she's not in the formal decision chain. Okay, these are things that really matter to business, but often you don't know them going in. Oh, sorry, you wanted to. I think I did. Sorry, did I get you too early? Okay. Here's another one. Consulting example. Project methodology, deliverable templates, client presentations, beautiful fonts on PowerPoints. Not documented. The sponsor says they want innovation, but what they really want is a validation of their direction they've already chosen. The real budget holder is in finance, not the business unit. Previous projects failed because we didn't involve the regional teams early enough. They torpedoed implementation. Another one, last one. Okay, I'm just trying to get a feel for what this type of knowledge is. A tech example, documented. We have code, architecture diagram, API documentation. What's not often documented. We built this way because the legacy system has an undocumented rate limit that crashes if you hit it too hard. The third-party vendor's API is unreliable between 2 and 4 a.m. EST, so we batched those calls differently and never refactored the payment module without talking to Sarah. She's the only one who understands why it works. Okay. So you get this picture of knowledge being important, and when people leave, they take it with them, and it's a drag, right? And you don't have that value. And some people are serious about this. Some people have, as a part of their function, knowledge management. So I work with, at Texas A&M, we have a ton of engineering. We have a whole department, a whole building full of nuclear engineering. And so I, in my function in learning and development, work with them. And so been up to Los Alamos National Lab, where the Manhattan Project was. Fascinating work there, but they really care about this, right? There are a lot of engineers, and from a national security standpoint, they have to care about it. A lot of engineers are retiring right now and leaving. And so they have concerted efforts, right, to document the knowledge that's in place, and that led to the innovations that they're continuing to have there. So my thought is, and question to you is, what is your firm doing right now, right? And I think what often happens, most orgs are, creating documents and SOPs, right? And that can actually, help with these explicit procedures, right? But what it misses is context, judgment, relationship history. Oftentimes people use exit interviews as a means to capture some knowledge, but really it only gives surface level insights. You can job shadow and observe the way people do things, watch them, see what they do, try and calculate that. And I will say it's outside of the scope of this, but since Owen talked about it last night, where is Owen? I don't know. Is he in here? He's probably doing something. Doing something clever. Okay. AI is really important here as well, right? And documenting that firm brain. In the past, when you had a 300-page, manual, no one read it. But AI can actually read it for you and make it very plain English, tell you what to do based upon certain circumstances. So AI will have a huge role in knowledge management in the next, oncoming, 2 to 5 years. But in the meantime, these traditional strategies of knowledge management, what they miss, alumni can deliver. Okay, and oftentimes they're at this kind of perfect. They have this tacit knowledge that's basically in another firm right now, but being able to maintain those relationships becomes very important. And so I'm going to talk today, and everything I talk about with alumni is I always kind of have this 3-phase kind of framework, and that's before they leave, the exit transition, and then after they leave, right? So I'm going to kind of talk about how we can what things can be done before alumni leave, and then at exit, and then kind of persisting into the future. So pre-departure, first of all, get serious about documenting the knowledge that people have. Particularly if you know at some cadence someone's going to leave, if they're planning on retiring, take the time to do what I'm calling a knowledge audit, okay? And here's just a very kind of canned version of what I would call a knowledge audit. Okay, asking questions like, what are their unique expertise domains? What are the informal networks they have? What relationships do they have? How do they approach problems? Documenting that, right, for each of the people who are currently doing something in key roles, right? What dependencies do we have on them, right? If they left tomorrow, what would fail? If they, what decisions should have their input? And then in the end, kind of trying to to think what of this knowledge is more in the tacit realm, right? And trying to, even from your own qualitative sense, like, these are things that, there are some things they bring that we just cannot write down, and they're going to have to be involved in the long term based upon the audit that you do, right? And so this is something you can, work with your workforce analytics, find the key jobs, the key people who might be at flight risk, and start kind of doing this and keeping this data. And then having AI help you to digest it, right? At this point, at one point data, too much data was a problem. I really don't think it's as much of a problem anymore, because you do knowledge audit worksheets on 1,000 people, and you could get insights from 1,000 people, right? To help you with your particular place. So thinking of phase 2, at the exit, what are things that you can do, right? I would argue that there are ways in which you can actually get agreements with key, right? And I think at this point, based upon your knowledge audit, maybe you want to have a retainer for somebody. Maybe you want Dawn to still go to lunch every Sunday or 2 Sundays, right? And just say, look, hey, will you keep doing that, right, as an alum, as you've retired? Maybe there is some sort of agreement around crisis response. If we have a client that you are key to, let's create an agreement at exit that we can call on you if something crazy happens and goes awry, that we can call you back in. Maybe to mentor. Maybe you have an agreement around mentoring. Maybe you're a part of an expert directory. And in this, so I think for the most part, alumni relationships are based more upon kind of a loose social exchange, where you don't really necessarily have timing associated with the resources that will be given. But I think in some cases there might be a situation where you should, right? Where you should actually say, hey, this is a person we need to even say, and even have ways in which we pay them, right, in certain instances to help us and to remain connected to us. And so I want to just put up there a couple of reasons why in the third phase, often knowledge preservation isn't managed well, right? So after they've exited, you've had this, talk about agreeing on things. Alumni don't respond. Why it happens? Unclear expectations, poor questions, no accountability. Also, I would say, where was the other piece? What's in it for them, right, is the other one. I think it's really there, right? So solutions, set explicit response commitments, right? I didn't say that in the last one, but that's another thing you could have as an agreement, right? If you're going to talk to someone, set expectations with an alum, talk to them about, hey, if we reach out to you, we'd like you to get back to us within a week, right? Something like that. So set explicit agreements. Employees don't use the system. Well, you need a better system with lower friction like EA. Alumni drift away over time, no value for them. This is the big one, right? How do you add value to them, right? You only ask for help in a crisis, right? So that's kind of like one of those friends who reaches out whenever they need something. Well, that's kind of annoying, right? So have warm touch points, right? All throughout, so that social exchange piece doesn't get lost. Because if you are trying to explicate kind of agreements with people, you got to still remember they are not a formal employee, and so you need to grease those wheels. So the bottom line is, exit interviews are not enough, and tacit knowledge, which is often the most valuable knowledge. Alumni can fill that gap. They can be a very important way in which you have strategic knowledge still available to you through your alumni. And so whether this is part of your business case to get more funding, whether it's just another way to increase kind of the validity of what you're doing. And so start knowledge preservation before they leave as well, is the other big takeaway from that. And make explicit agreements. So I want to move from knowledge preservation to knowledge, basically creating knowledge, to innovation, right? Knowledge that didn't exist before. And I want to talk about this really important role that alumni are positioned to be as innovators in your current company, and hopefully have a couple conversations and hopefully give you kind of some tools, some things to kind of get up and walk away, and in your first 90 days after this, do something differently because of this, okay? So innovation often happens, it often is stifled in organizations because of what researchers call functional fixedness. It's this idea that, well, generally, organizations become more homogenous over time, right? People have they have access to the same stimuli, the same information. You hire people who are like you, and people quit when they don't like your culture. So you end up kind of over time becoming more homogenous, right? That's why I often say, like, you know, when I'm talking to HR or even just business leaders, and I say, you know, the word fit sometimes means like me, you know, and that may not be the best thing to go for when you're selecting employees, especially if you want new ideas, right? But alumni occupy this kind of unique place where they understand your context, but they're not in your context. And there can be some really interesting and unique innovations that can happen because of there are these kind of these kind of insiders, but also outsiders as well. And so, and by the way, the research and the organizational sciences on this, they call them boundary spanners. And boundary spanners are key to innovation. People who talk to broadly across industries, who across disciplines. That's often where the best and most novel knowledge and ideas exist. And that was not AI, that was Google. And it looks like a precarious position. I don't know how precarious it is to be a boundary spanner, but that's the first one that came up, and I was lazy. Okay, so I want to talk about three pathways and then three mechanisms through which alumni are positioned to be innovators in your current setting. So one, they act to kind of cross-pollinate best practices across industries and contexts. So you think of like someone working at a B2B software company moves into retail. And in retail, they have a predictive analytics for customer retention, understanding their pain points. And there's all sorts of data that's collected on wow, like this is pretty sophisticated. We should have that back at my old company, right? To understand customer pain points and think about data-driven insights and how to retain our customers better, right? But they're not gonna just go and tell you, right? So you have to, the people in this room have to be the ones to say, hey, what are your ideas? And we'll talk about those in a second. But imagine all of the different things that can be learned in the new setting. Oftentimes, especially if they go to startups, they'll see things that are happening before they make it kind of more mainstream and different solutions than, you know, a lot of times in startups, you take more risks. You're trying out new things. You're trying to move first, right? And so they can actually give you kind of ideas about what's going on elsewhere. And lastly, alumni can act as a facilitator of trust. You know, I think this is a really big one when it comes to connecting people and ideas. So going back 25 years in business school, I had this friend of mine named Dave Peary, and he played music. We both played music together. And he showed up in my class one day, and he's sitting over there. I'm like, what is this guy doing here? And it turned out his brother was giving a guest lecture, and his brother had taken over for his dad, for Peary and Iriaga, who are come to find out, on like the Forbes list. But they are commercial real estate developers in the Silicon Valley and had been for 20 years at that point. So I don't even know if they're still around. But so this guy, Peary, basically starts to talk about what led to his dad's empire, real estate empire. And it had everything to do with just trust between his partner, Peary and Iriaga. I mean, they had handshake deals that were worth millions of dollars. So the trust between them and the trust with their, you know, just their word, right? And so it was just this, and then he even said that was really what made them successful. When everyone else, when real estate was having downturns, everyone else started blaming each other, you know, and they had those solid relationships within and without, right? And something 25 years later, I remember and carry with me, and it's that the trust you have with the people who you know is a competitive advantage, right? It can lead to making, you know, decisions without having to vet people for however many months, right? And so alums can be that for you, right? They can introduce you to people, and they can have they can facilitate kind of new innovations because of their position, their unique position as boundary spanners. I want to talk about a note on segmentation. Here are some people you want to focus on. Alums, right? Alums, because you can't do this with everybody, right? So the people you want to focus on are people who leave the industry. People who are, I would call them high velocity careers, people, your high potentials, they're often working on the cutting edge things in their new firm. Academic research roles, like me, you want to talk to me, I'm not your alum though, so it doesn't matter. Entrepreneurs, they go up, again, great people to think about. Now let's talk about the mechanisms and the different ways you can start something to actually make it happen. So you could have a quarterly innovation advisory council. So you take your 15 to 20 people who were on the list from the last slide, and you say, hey, we'd like to invite you to be on an innovation advisory council, all right? We're gonna put together a room for you at our headquarters once a quarter. We'll fly you out, and you just talk ideas, and it'll be across industries. So an easy way to do that, right? What is new? People love to solve problems. People love to make an impact. Perhaps as a function of this quarterly Innovation Advisor Council, you say, hey, we've got a challenge at our firm. You're all alums, you all identify with us. This one council, I'm gonna give this problem to you guys. Help us fix this, all right? So bring them a big challenge and then just say, hey, help us fix this problem, right? You could have I'm sure you could on your platform, create a place for them to say, for that person who moved to retail and they're looking at their predictive analytics and they're like, they should do that. Have a place on your alumni platform where you can just put in ideas, right? And call that out and say, hey, anything you've learned since you've left, we would love, that you think would apply to our context, we'd love to talk to you about it. So have a place that formally they are called to say, hey, and then have your team look at those things, vet those things, and perhaps even say, hey, we'll pay you a bonus if you give us an idea that actually ends up being piloted here and creating value. We'll give you money for it, right? And on top of that, perhaps you have an innovative challenge. Say you have this big problem, and you're just like, hey, we're gonna do a competition between our alumni. We have this problem. Whoever comes up with the best idea, and it's an acronym that's a former executive, we'll give you money, right? If you come up and you help us fix this problem. Again, so just all sorts of different ways in which and ideas to really catalyst, this type of behavior. This if they are positioned in that way, and so we don't have time for this, but I want you to walk away from today. What is one quick win, right, that you can launch, an innovation-focused initiative in the next 90 days? What would it be? So I want you to, over the next 2 minutes, write that down and then email me. No, I'm joking, don't. But you gotta be accountable to yourselves though, right? Think of something that you can do and that you want to do in your role to actually make change, because this is where you can create value. So just to wrap up, companies are being drained of tacit knowledge. You know this. And really, you need processes to preserve knowledge before, during, and after exit. And alumni are uniquely positioned to create this knowledge. And I guess I'll just leave. I want you to feel, a sense that you want to get up out of your chair and do something right now. You are the ones who are uniquely positioned to make this happen. And if you can deliver on this value, it will only get you more resources, right, to continue to demonstrate your value add as an alumni manager. That's it. Thank you, guys.